Floor. Madam President, I would note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander. Senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I come to the floor.
Quorum call.
Excuse me. Madam President, I would ask that the calling of the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I come to the floor this evening to express my hope that the bipartisan effort that brought us this 3-month bill here to the floor can be sustained as we go forward, so that we can swiftly help the 1.3 million long-term unemployed workers who are cut off from these benefits on December 28th. As many of my colleagues have discovered from going back to the home states, they are, in many cases, desperate. This was the difference between things that we take for granted. Having a car to be able to get to a job interview. Having a cell phone so that you can get a message saying you have a job interview. Paying for heat in cold weather. Putting groceries on the table. For many people, this is truly an emergency, and that's why working with Senator Heller, who I will applaud for his both vision and his collaboration and for his sense in terms of the difficulties of his constituents and nationally many people for his effort. He did a superb job. But what we sensed was we needed to provide relief immediately. Longer term, there are issues, and my colleagues have been on the floor discussing those issues. But immediately, we have 1.3 million Americans, and every day more go off the rolls, that need help. And I hope we could move very expeditiously, provide at least this short-term help. And then, of course, we have very significant issues going forward for the entire year benefits, which I hope ultimately we can resolve. And along with Senator Heller, obviously I want to thank all my colleagues. Particularly, I want to thank Senator Collins and Murkowski and Senator Portman and Ayotte and Senator Coates for their support, along with all of our members of the Democratic caucus, which came together. Now we have the challenge of providing this relief and then thinking creatively, constructively, and collaboratively how we provide this relief at least through the full year. I hope we can do the next 90 days immediately, quickly, but that other issue certainly is before us. Now, I understand also that, my colleagues have raised issues about the structure of the program, about whether this spending, even the short-term spending, should be offset. But again, I go back to the point of we've got 1.3 million Americans and growing each day that are looking for immediate help, not thoughtful, careful, long-term deliberation. And again, that was the logic behind moving to a 90-day period, get it done, and then go forward and deal with inherently more difficult issues for a full-year program. We already understand that short-term lapse from the 28th till today has already had dramatic impacts on families. This is what I think my colleagues have heard and seen and read about when they've gone home. Men and women who worked for decades, never thinking they'd ever use their unemployment benefits, which they paid into since they started working, now suddenly faced with a job market where there are 3 people for every 1 job, where there are issues of skill training for the new jobs that are emerging. These are very difficult challenges. And again, I think what finally led us to at least this point of moving forward was the perception that this program is not some arcane abuse by people of the system. This is for working men and women who, through no fault of their own, lost their jobs, who are desperately looking for jobs, who are our neighbors, our constituents, people, again, many whom we thought and they thought would never be in this predicament, who have families, senior parents, young children, who have responsibilities. and who have something else, too, which I think we sometimes don't give enough credit to. They want to work, but they've spent a life, many of them, working to a position of responsibility where they're using all their talents, and the idea that they're going to just give that up for the only available job, which might be working a counter at a fast food restaurant, that's a challenge not only to your pocketbook, that's a challenge to your person, to who you are. And we have to recognize that also. So these benefits they're hugely helpful to people in so many different capacities. And as I said, you know, we're trying to deal with a situation where people are let go through no fault of your own. If you quit, you don't qualify. If you're fired, you don't qualify. Many of these people are the results of the new economy, information technology that makes their job something that can be done away with, mergers and acquisitions and downsizings that cause the bottom line of the corporation to grow, but they're out of a job. And we have to deal with it. And we have to deal with it, as we've done so many times before, by providing these long-term unemployment benefits. And we also have to do it because it's good for our economy. The CBO estimates that if we do not renew UI for the full year, this year, 2014, we will lose 200,000 jobs because the weekly benefits, which are rather modest, $300 to $350 a week, go almost immediately from the recipient into the economy. It's the reason why some grocery stores can keep 2 or 3 extra people on, because the demand is still there. It's the reason that some service stations can keep the extra mechanic on, because the demand is still there. We shut down that demand, we'll have 200,000 more people. Ironically, 200,000 people that will qualify, at least initially, for state unemployment benefits. So this is about our economy. And I'd really like to draw my colleagues' attention to the report that our colleague, Senator Amy Klobuchar, did as the vice chair of the Joint Economic Committee. And it was very thoughtfully done, not a surprise given it was authored in large part by Senator Klobuchar. And this report touches on these important issues and notes that, and I quote, unemployment insurance, UI, has kept more than 11 million people out of poverty since 2008, including 1.8 million adults and 620,000 children in 2012 alone. People of all demographic and socioeconomic backgrounds have been helped by unemployment insurance following a job loss. This cuts across the whole spectrum. And again, how do you get to qualify? You got to work. And I would suspect every one of my colleagues would say this country should all be about work. Rewarding work, and if you lose it through no fault of your own, giving you a chance to get back in the workforce. And the reality of this economic downturn is it's been so pervasive that it's affected virtually every American. And unemployment insurance has been a key part of the recovery. We all know that economists that have looked at this program will suggest that there's anywhere from $1.50 to $1.60 benefit for every dollar we put in the economy. Economically, from the national economy as a whole, this is a very powerful tool to keep economic growth, expansion, and demand moving forward. And that's exactly what we need to keep the economy growing. Indeed, one of the aspects of this recession, and one of the aspects highlighted very insightfully by the report from the Joint Economic Committee, is long-term rate of unemployment. This might be a new structural phenomenon in an economy, but it is definitely something's happening out there. Typically, I'll go back to when I was a kid. You're on the third shift because you were the junior person. Recession came, guess who got laid off? The third shift. Second shift, middle people. First shift, most senior people, they typically weren't touched. Economy came back, that third shift got rehired. But those workers with 10, 15 years experience, they were pretty safe. Now that's not the case. Now we're seeing first, second, third shift going. Now we're seeing, well, this is a great opportunity with interest rates at in some cases 1%, at least for the major financial institutions, to replace a lot of workers with a lot of machines. Let's do that. Let's get value. Let's downsize. Let's make sure we invest in capital, and then. So these are the phenomena that we're seeing, and it's causing this significant increase in long-term unemployment. In the JSC report, they note the current long-term unemployment rate of 2.6% is twice as high as it was when Congress allowed emergency federal UI programs to expire after the 1990-91 and the 2001 recessions. Let me just say that in my terms, is that previously we have never taken away these benefits, and these benefits are directly responsible to long-term unemployment. The 26 weeks of the state benefit programs, you know, those are for people who lose work, find it relatively quickly. This program, the one we're debating today, is specifically designed for those people who are having a difficult time finding work over a long period of time. And we are now twice as high level of unemployment as we were in previous recessions when we ended these benefits, which would suggest this is not the time to end this benefit. Let me continue from the JEC report. While employment prospects have improved for many jobless Americans, the national unemployment rate is 7%, the lowest rate in 5 years. Finding work is challenging for the long-term unemployed. More than one-third of unemployed workers, roughly 4 million Americans, have been searching for work for more than 26 weeks when state-funded UI benefits typically run out, and 2.8 million unemployed people have been searching for work for more than 1 year. This is a phenomenon that we have to deal with. This program that we are discussing today is specifically designed for those long-term unemployed. So if there's one program that is responsive to one of the most salient aspects of this current recession, it's the long-term UI program, because long-term unemployment seems to be the most difficult issue to resolve, even as our overall employment numbers continue to grow. Not fast enough, but they're growing. And then I like to also dispel the belief of some of my colleagues that these benefits just flow to one or two distinct constituencies. This is a targeted program that provides some benefits, but it doesn't apply to across the board. This is about every American from virtually every type of educational, income, and ethnic background. As the JEC report documents, and I quote again, the 23.9 million Americans who have directly benefited from the EUC program since 2008 include people of all demographic and socio and economic backgrounds. In 2012, more than 60% of the recipients were between the ages of 25 and 54. Let me stop. There's a stereotype out there that a lot of these folks are 18-year-olds who had a job for a while but decided they'd rather go skiing in Utah or snorkeling in the Caribbean, and what better way to do that than just essentially, sort of perform so that when the layoffs come, you get one, but so what? I'm not going to look for work. I'm going to go. 60% of these people are 25 years old to 54 years old. They are starting the prime or in the prime of the work career. They have responsibilities. They typically have families. They have had, if you're in their 50s, you've probably been working for 30 years. So this notion of this is just a convenient time to take a vacation subsidized by the government is erroneous. Let me continue from the report. The remaining recipients were about evenly split between those younger than 25 and those 55 and older. And again, for the 55 and older, and this is very close to home, for these people it is a desperate struggle, because they are caught right in the middle. They've got a 75-year-old or 80-year-old mother or father. They have 30-year-old children and some younger who are going to school or they need the help. They've been working for 30-plus years. They've reached positions of responsibility in their firm, and now suddenly, for the first time, many of the cases, they are without a job. And that's not just economic, as I suggested, that also goes deeply to who they are, their value, how can they help their family if they can't work, What is the effect on the family? You know, how do you come home every day from looking for work without a job and not have it affect your family? This is the reality we're dealing with. And that's why, frankly, I have been pleading to at least let's get this program restored for 90 days. Give us the time, not on the backs of the unemployed, but give us the time to do the work for a longer extension. Now, let me continue. More than half of the recipients in 2012 were white, as the report says, Caucasians, while 22% were black and 19% were Hispanic. The vast majority, 85%, lived in households with more than one adult, and 43% lived in households with at least one child. So these are not single transients who move around and are used to being unemployed and could work if they wanted to. These are people with real family responsibilities. People of all levels of education have received these benefits. The majority of recipients in 2012 had earned a high school diploma, and almost one-fifth held a four-year college degree. These are people that have skills. They've at least got the credentials which, again, 20 or 30 years ago, put you into the workplace and probably kept you there if you were diligent. So I hope my colleagues take time to review this report. It is extremely useful. It shatters some stereotypes, and it reinforces the point that this is about helping working Americans who need help. I think the facts are clearly on the side of continuing this program. And I think the reality is that they need the help now. And if we can get them that help, then we have the time to deliberate on very serious questions, which my colleagues have raised, and raise them constructively and raise them sincerely about the long-term approach to this program. But to continue to trade sort of legislative ideas on the floor while millions of Americans either are losing their benefits or see the end coming within days and weeks and months is not the right response. So I urge my colleagues to move forward through these procedural hurdles. Let's get this bill done, as Senator Heller and I have proposed it. Let's get it done. And then we've got another huge challenge, because we want, frankly, and I think it's the sentiment across the board, well, if we're going to do this, let's at least continue it through the year 2014. We're beginning to sense some economic positive shifts. We hope those materialize. We hope they come forward to the point where the unemployment rate, it's fallen. I heard the President today, when he took over, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. It was rocketing up into the stratosphere, 12%, 14%. In Rhode Island, it's still 9%. But we've seen some progress. Not enough in my case, in my state, in Nevada and other states, but we've seen progress. And we hope that progress continues. And indeed, one of the other aspects of this program, if we pass these benefits, and the economists will point out, particularly if we pass them on an emergency basis, it will add more fuel to our economy, not less. It will add more demand. It will, in fact, increase growth at the time where everyone is on the floor talking about, well, we just have to grow more jobs. Of course it is. But this program, it's in a way the proverbial twofer. You help people who need help, and you help the economy grow faster. 200,000 jobs at least. And so I really do think we should move forward as quickly as we can to get this Reid-Heller bill completed. And then we have a lot of careful, thoughtful, collaborative effort to engage in, because if we want to go forward for a full year, which we do, we have other significant issues, not just the size of the program, but other issues that have been brought up by colleagues. Brought up very fairly, very constructively, and very thoughtfully. So, Madam President, my message is one, I thank my colleagues for giving us the chance to seriously debate this bill, and I urge them to pass it quickly, and then we'll set ourselves up for another serious, thoughtful, and constructive debate. That's my wish. With that, Madam President, I would note the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander.
Madam President,
Senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President, I would ask that the calling of the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that Senate now proceed to calendar number 270, Senate Resolution 288.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 270, SRES 288, supporting enhanced maritime security in the Gulf of Guinea and so forth.
I ask
Without
unanimous
objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motion to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 273, Senate Resolution 318.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 273, SRES 318, expressing the sense of the Senate regarding the critical need for political reform in Bangladesh and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I further ask that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the committee reported title amendment be agreed to, and the motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 274, Senate Resolution 319.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 274, SRES 319, expressing support for the Ukrainian people in light of the President's decision not to sign an association agreement with the European Union.
Without objection.
I further ask that
The Senate will proceed to the measure.
Thank you, Madam President. I further ask that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to Senate Resolution 329, submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
SRES 329, expressing support for the goals and ideals of the biennial USA Science and Engineering Festival in Washington, D.C., and so forth.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motion to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it adjourn until 10 a.m. on Wednesday, January 8, 2014, that following the prayer and the pledge, the morning hour be deemed expired, the journal of proceedings be approved today, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day. And that following any leader remarks, the Senate resume the motion to proceed to S-1845, the unemployment insurance extension, post-cloture. And that all time during adjournment count post-cloture on the motion to proceed to S-1845.
Without objection.
Madam President, if there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Earlier today, the Senate voted to advance a bill extending unemployment benefits for 3 months. 6 Republicans joined all voting Democrats in the 60-37 vote. Many Republicans opposed it because the measure does not contain offsetting cuts. Well, shortly after the Senate voted to advance the jobless benefits bill, House Speaker John Boehner's office issued a statement that says in part, "1 month ago, I personally told the White House that another extension of temporary emergency unemployment benefits should not only be paid for, but include something to help people get back to work. To date, the President has offered no such plan. If he does, I'll be happy to discuss it, but right now the House is going to remain focused on growing the economy." That from House Speaker John Boehner. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, in her statement, meanwhile, said House Republicans must end their short-sighted and immoral insistence on leaving these Americans out in the cold. Failure to extend unemployment insurance will cost the economy 240,000 jobs over the next year. Shortly after the vote, Senate Democrats offered reaction on moving the bill forward.